podcast. We have a very special guest today with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm TaLynn Kel. I'm a cosplayer out of Atlanta.
Nice. Could you spell that for us so that everyone can find you on Instagram, Facebook, all of the above?
That is TaLynnKel.
Perfect. She has some amazing work. You definitely need to check out her Instagram. What would you say is, excuse me, one of your best cosplays, to date?
Oh my gosh. Okay, see, that's a hard thing to assess. Because, like, there's different things you like about different ones. As in the most grandiose one, the one that's gotten the best feedback, the one that I enjoy building the most, all different.
How about
All
the
different.
one that's best for you? Like, maybe everyone else didn't appreciate it the way you did, but this is the one that, either you put a lot of hard work into or even the one you put the least work into, just the one that you love the most.
So, oh my gosh. So years ago, I did a version of Raven. It was based on a statue, Amikami Raven, where it's the demon daughter version where she's red.
Okay.
And it's my favorite one because I had to make so many elements. Like, I had to make a belt, I had to make all these buckles, I had to add so many things to the cosplay that I had to build from scratch. And I enjoyed the entire process. But the one thing, and I'm going to redo this, but I haven't yet, was the cape, because she has this cape that is a portal to a demon dimension. And at the time, all I could do was like buy a cape and glue like some teeth and some eyeballs and some puffy paint to it. And people were like, that's awesome. But I was so ashamed of it. Like, my significant other was ashamed of it. We both sat there like, this is the ugliest shit ever. And we should not wear this. But when people saw it, they loved it. But for me, all the rest of the work of the costume, I mean, it was a lot. And it was actually one of the worst ones, because when I put it together, I was so excited about it. I didn't realize that to go to the bathroom, I had to take off the entire thing. Like, the entire thing.
Wow.
So yeah, I didn't think that part through. So if I ever, I say if, when I redo it, I'm going to do the cape right, and it won't be a cape. It'll literally be a wall of like demon faces, and I can't wait to do that. And I'm going to be able to go to the bathroom in it.
Gotcha. That is very important, of course.
Like, all cosplayers do it at least once. Like, we make it and we don't realize, oh my gosh, like, when you wear a onesie, you should always detach the hands so it's gloves, because when you want to wash your hands after you go to the bathroom, you can't pull your top up. You can't put it back on to go wash your hands. So it was something where I literally had at times had my top scrunched between my legs and shuffled out to the sink to wash my hands, and then put the rest of the costume on, and people just looking at me, and I'm like, hey.
Yeah,
I've cosplay.
Definitely not anything I've ever experienced before. I can't say I can relate, honestly.
Well, you'll do it one day. One day you'll get that one thing where you're like, I want to wear this onesie, and you will not detach the hands, and you will regret that.
Got it. That's future knowledge for anyone out there who plans on buying a onesie like myself. So,
Yep.
All right. And so that's really interesting, though, that you said that you thought it didn't look good, and a lot of other people admired it. But that just goes to show, I think a lot of times we're our own harshest critics. You're like, oh, this looks terrible and I hate it. And everyone else is just like, wow, I wish I could do something like that.
And that does happen a lot, like a lot. Or if you even be like, this is my worst cosplay ever, and people are just like, whatever, I think it's fantastic. Like my Blade cosplay. The first time I did it, I kid you not, I was at Dragon Con. I had just brought I always bring like an extra corset and some pants or whatever, just in case, right? You just never know when you might need some extra piece of clothing. And I didn't have a third cosplay, because usually I have one for each day. A friend of mine was like, oh, I brought my Blade jacket and the sword and stuff. If you want to wear it, you can wear it. I already own fangs. And I don't know why I had them. Oh, I was wearing Nightcrawler that weekend. So I was like, okay, I have my fangs for that. I said, I guess I could do Blade. And so I borrowed his stuff and just put it on with some pants and boots and stuff I already had. And I was like, this is the most like last minute bullshit cosplay ever. People stop me all day long, and I kid you not, for like years afterwards, people were like, that's my favorite cosplay that you've ever done.
Exactly.
And I'm like, I had another cosplay I had worked on where I had busted my ass. No one noticed that one. No one gave a damn about that one. But that Blade,
That's
That
always how it goes. I swear, it's like the ones that you think are really going to draw people in, and they're the ones that you put blood, sweat, and tears into. No one
yes.
cares about. The one that you spend 5 minutes on is the one that goes viral.
Right. Half the stuff I wore wasn't even mine. I was
Yep,
mad as hell.
yep. That's
People
how it
still
goes.
request it. They still request it. I now I've changed it and added elements to make it mine. Like I actually own my coat now. I made my weapons, like that kind of thing. But at the time, and that was back in the day when you could carry live steel. So I actually had a real sword
Mm.
at Dragon Con.
Man, yeah, that was days long past.
Yeah, I can't do that anymore.
Hmm. But yes, because yeah, unfortunately the world is taking a darker shift, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was asked, what do you do for a living? Like, how do you fund your cosplay goals and dreams?
Interestingly enough, I am a writer, actually, in real life. I did not think I would ever get to a point where I was doing writing as my real job. And I'll also be honest, I don't really like doing it as for other companies and stuff because the stuff that you're doing is usually propaganda. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't really like writing propaganda for people. If I believe in what you're doing, I'll write. I have no problem with that. But if it's something where I'm having to kind of twist the truth or hide things or that kind of stuff and shape it into a narrative that's not real, I have a really hard time with it. So, but yeah, I do. I am a writer. I write websites. My favorite is when I get to do research and just kind of rewrite the research.
Mm-hmm.
I do health communication type work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if I can just do the research part and then write up the research, it's great. It's when they push me into, we need you to write something, so that the public can understand this thing, but you know, not not the whole truth. You
Yeah,
can't write
yeah.
the whole truth.
Of
And I'm
course
like, well,
not.
I I don't want to not write the whole truth.
I was just having a discussion with my brother, and we were talking about some controversial things and things in life in general. But it seems like the one thing we definitely both agree on is whatever you do, never tell the truth, because that's going to get you in so much trouble. And I hate to say it, but it's like if you go to work and your boss is asking you, what can we do to be more productive? You're like, well, honestly, if you came out here and got out of your office and helped us, that would probably help us get more work done.
Hmm.
Yep, don't ever tell the truth and say, you know what, maybe I could come in longer, maybe I can stay longer, because that's what they want to hear.
Yeah, I won't even tell them that because I'm not going to do that. But yeah, it is true. Like they don't want. I didn't get in trouble, but I got pushed into my boss basically saying I need you to lie to me because I was late to work, and it was something so benign. It was such a little thing. I was late to work because I was so tired I turned off my alarm.
Hmm.
That's it. That was the truth. So I came in and she was like, "Why are you late?" I was like, "Cause I turned off my alarm and went back to sleep." And she just looked at me.
Like, hey, I'm being truthful, yeah.
Yeah, she was like, "So your alarm didn't go off?" And I was like, "No, that shit went off. I just turned it off and went back to sleep." And she's like, "So your alarm didn't go off, right?" Like he was straight up like, "Just change your story. I need you to say this lie out loud." And I was like, "I don't need to say nothing,
Yeah.
but
It
okay, I
is what
got
it
the
is.
hint." Like I
Yeah.
got the hint, and that was don't. And I couldn't believe it at the time. I was really young. I
Hmm.
was still in my 20s, and that was like my first like real job, like long-term job. So I was still kind of like, wow, y'all would really prefer that I just make up some BS so that you don't have to punish me or feel like you have to punish me or something. When really it's just okay, I made a mistake, and the punishment is that I don't get paid for that hour that I was late.
Nope. Whatever you do, like I said, don't tell the truth.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
So,
That's the culture they create, and that's why we lose innovation. That's why people are scared to take chances. That's why
no,
people are literally scared to make mistakes.
exactly why. And anyways, I could go off onto that too. And yes, yeah, we'll switch back to cosplay.
Like, you brought that up. That wasn't me.
Yes, that was yeah. So anyway, so you were talking about your Raven outfit earlier, and I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but she has an amazing Storm cosplay. Also, several others. But what gave you the inspiration to make these? Because yeah, go ahead.
Well, I like dressing up. So I've been going to conventions since 2004. That
Okay.
was my very first Dragon Con. And I didn't attend. I was just outside looking at people and being like, I didn't know we actually had stuff like this. This is awesome. I want to dress up. I didn't know we could do this. We're coming next year. And that was literally all it took. So for next year, I was like, we're making a costume and we're going to Dragon Con and we're going all 3 days. So we bought our tickets and we were commuting. I didn't have a hotel room because I live in Atlanta and I thought we could just commute, not realizing how hard it was going to be in costume and how long I didn't know it was 24 hours and I didn't know I'd want to stay there all 24 hours. So it was really just knowing that, basically watching other people in costume and giving me permission to do it. As far as the characters that I've chose, Storm is the most popular cosplay among other people that they recognize me for, that they like, that one in Blade. I get it, but I don't get it. People like it when you look like the character, sort of, as close as you can.
That's true. Yep.
So the fact that I'm doing these Black characters and I'm a Black person, they like it because it just helps it bring it all together for them. I actually fought against doing Storm for a very long time. The first time I cosplayed Storm was back in 2008, and I did Bloodstorm when I found that there was a version where she was a vampire. And I was like, oh crap, and she got a mohawk, and she got fangs, and she got red eyes. I was like, I'm totally rocking that. It was basically Punk Storm with like fangs. So I did that because that was fun. And I never had any interest in doing any other version. And then I said, but if I did do it, and this was years later, I would want to do it with a big white afro. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, finding a big white afro was hard. You couldn't. They weren't in wig stores. They weren't even in costume stores. The kind of afros that were in costume stores were always like dark colors, and they were ugly afros. Like they were the little tight ones that I wanted something huge and voluminous. So it took a couple years to even find that wig. And once we found the wig, I have a woman in Atlanta who helps me find wigs. Once she found the wig, I was like, oh, I could do a costume. So that's the big Afro Storm cosplay came together in 2 weeks because I was doing, it was a cosplay like live modeling event at Apache Cafe, which is a local cafe. And they would have artist shows. And I said, I want something new for that. And so I went to the clothing store and I was looking for any kind of fabric that would be kind of cool looking. And I went to tour it at the mall. And I kid you not, the employees must have thought I was trying to shoplift. I stood in the store for like an hour and a half trying to find something. And I was just looking at stuff, trying to be like, would that work? I don't think that'll work. Let me think about it. In the back of a rack, I found 2 pairs of leggings. And I was like, they're identical, but they were different sizes. I was like, I wonder if I could make this look like, I wonder if I could wear like one of these as a shirt. And so I took the smaller pair and I held them up and I put my arms in them. And I was like, I think this could work if I put a hole in the crotch. So I did. I bought them both. Brought them home and I took a seam ripper to the crotch, put it on over my head, and I was like, this looks like a half shirt. If I put on the bottoms and put a corset over the middle, it'll look like a onesie, and this'll work. So then at that point, I was like, I have a cape. I need to add gold trim to it. I literally bought gold ribbon from Michaels and used fabric tape to line the edges of the cape. I made the headpiece from some thermoplastic from Warble and Foam. And I made an X-Men piece out of Warble and Foam. And then that was it. That was my costume.
Wow.
And so I got it done. And, like the week of, and did the event. And then everybody was like, that Storm is fierce. We love it. It's fantastic. And I take that back. The first time I made the headpiece, I thought the Warble and Foam was too heavy. So I just used like black foam, the 2mm foam, but it was too floppy and I didn't look right. So I had to figure out how to make the heavier one work later. But yeah, that became a signature cosplay for me and people just adored it. And I'm like, all right, I mean, I'll do it. It's not my favorite. I like the wig though. Actually, I love the wig.
But
and I like the cape.
You have to give the people what they want.
No, I don't. I do not.
Technically, you don't. You're right. All right. And so On that note, also, if anyone doesn't know, you've been featured at a few conventions, and you've written your own book. Could you talk to us a bit more about both of those? Like, what gave you the inspiration and the desire, the goal to write your own book, and then how did you go about getting featured as a guest at different conventions?
So the book thing, it wasn't an intentional thing. What I did was I started writing essays back in 2015. Okay, so back in 2015, I was at my job and my boss flipped out and we got into a huge fight. And I realized when I went home that day that if I stayed at that job, I was going to kill her. So I was like, I have to quit. Like I have to just give 2 weeks and be out this bitch and go do something else. Like, and I said, I'm gonna take this time. I was like, because nobody's gonna be hiring because it was right before the holidays. I said, I'm gonna enjoy the holidays. I'm gonna build my website and I'm gonna start writing. I'm gonna start seeing what it's like to actually just be a public writer. So in the very beginning of my blog, you can see I was trying to figure out like what I was going to write about. So I was writing about conventions. I was writing about, it was literally like an online journal in some sense. And then the Trayvon Martin thing happened, and me and my significant other started fighting because he's a white dude, and I didn't realize that he held the views like Trayvon was an adult, that he held these views, and so we got into these huge fights. And I was like, I really feel like I'm about to get divorced. And I could feel it. So I started going online and I was looking for other people in interracial relationships to see how they were dealing with these conversations. And I couldn't find anybody that was talking about them. The people who talked about them were saying stuff like, oh, love is blind. We just don't talk about politics. Love conquers all that crap. And I was like, are y'all really telling me you're not out here calling out your spouse when they're saying racist shit? You just letting it fly? And so I decided to write about it. And I wrote this really long essay about how things had to change in our relationship. And I sat there with it for a while and I was like, I want to publish this, but I think it should be published somewhere other than on my blog. I think it should be somewhere with a bigger audience. So I had to go to my husband. I asked him, I was like, I need you to read this because this is about us. And he read it and he was like, this makes me look like an asshole. I was like, because you are. And he was like, okay. And but he was like, but it's your story. And I can't stop you from telling your story. So you do what you need to do with this. So I found some place to publish it. They did, and it kind of went viral. And I was surprised by that. Not like super viral, but like little viral. Enough where I got a lot of blowback from people, which was fascinating and unexpected. But it was still a very important thing. And that was when I realized that there were conversations that were being had but weren't being shared in the public. And I thought it would be important to start sharing them with the public. This is also the time where we also saw that that orange demon in the Oval Office was rising in popularity and was starting to win like primaries. And I was like, he's going to win. We need to actually start saying something because he's going to win and people don't realize this. So I felt like if I could talk about some of these difficult conversations even more publicly and call out some of this bullshit, that maybe it would start changing how people were seeing things. And so I started I wrote for Black Girl Nerds. I wrote for The Establishment. I've had stuff on Huffington Post. I've had stuff on Alternate, Everyday Feminism, Wear Your Voice Magazine, like all these different sites where I was basically being like, we got to be honest about racism. We've got to be honest about white supremacy. We had to start calling shit what it is. And I felt like I could change the world. I was wrong. But I wrote so much that year that by the time I got to the end of the year, I was like, I have like 90 some odd essays that I've written. Not all of them about that topic, but about all these different things. And so I curated them and I was like, if I just took the ones I wrote about whiteness, my relationship, what it's like trying to navigate these spaces as a fat Black woman, about trying to, get my self-esteem so I could be out here. And like, I never thought my self-esteem was an issue, because it's not when I'm home. It's just an issue when people are staring you in the face and being like, why is your fat ass out here? And I was like, because I'm alive and I want to be here. So like, I started writing about that journey, and I said, all of this, actually, if I put it into a book, and somebody else suggested it too. They said, you should compile it and put it into a book, and then you have a product. So I said, that's not a bad idea. And it took a couple months to do it, because I cite a lot of other articles.
Yeah.
And so I had to actually collect all the references and then format that. And that took the longest amount of time. And while I was doing that, I didn't realize how many articles I had read about Black people and Black women and women, just everybody being abused, all kinds of stuff. And I actually got really depressed for like a good month, where I was like, I can't even look at this. Like, it was just making me cry to look at the list of articles, because it was well over 100. Like, and I said, this is what I've been reading all year? That explains why I feel like crap. All right. So I had to kind of let that go and get it together. And then I finally did. And then I had a book. And I said, I'm going to self-publish it on Amazon. Amazon's not always the way to go. But I just wanted to see what the process was like. And I did. And I said, now I have this thing. Since I had this thing to sell, how do I market it? I still haven't figured out that part yet. I'm still working on that part. But.
And how old did you say your book was?
It's 2 years. 2 years. Yeah, because I finished it in 2017. The essays are from 2016, and I self-published it in 2017. Okay. And then in 2018, I took the 2017 and some of the 2016 essays, because there's context. I had to provide context for some of the newer essays, and I made them into a second book, because there was a continuation. And so now I have 2 of them that I take around with me and are available online. And I've had a lot of different people contact me and say that I talk about these complicated topics in a way that's accessible to people, and that they really appreciate it. So it's been a really interesting experience. But once I had the product, I was like, I need to be in places to sell this product.
Yeah, of course.
So how do I get on at conventions? And honestly, the way you get on at conventions, in a lot of ways, it's keeping your ear to the ground, seeing people who are running different events and getting to know them, finding out what the application process is to get into them. There's always small events happening all the time. You have to figure out whether or not it's worth your while to try and be in those spaces, because almost every event, even the small ones, there's somebody there who runs another event, and they might be looking for people. And if they meet you there, then now you're building that network of somebody else who would be interested. I love doing talks. I actually started doing panels before I wrote any essays. And I started doing content specifically at MomoCon, because MomoCon was open to the types of things I wanted to talk about. And so I started doing panels there. And because I was consistent and consistently good, when it came time for them to look for guests one year, they asked me to be a guest. I didn't ask to be one. They actually reached out to me. I was surprised. I did not expect it.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very surprising for me, but I appreciated it. And that really just came from, I'm gonna be here. I would pitch like 5 panels. They maybe take 2 or 3. I did them. I would be there on time. They didn't have to worry about me or my content. And they got enough of a good response that I was on their radar. And so that part of it was putting in this work, and also being in spaces and meeting and talking to people, and letting them know I am interested in doing more.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Like, you have to tell people that you want to do it. Like, right now, I'm going to be at Multiverse Con, which is in Atlanta in October, like October 18th and 19th. Yeah. And I actually pitched a panel to them called To Lewd or Not to Lewd. I don't do lewd cosplay, but I met someone who does lewd cosplay. This cosplayer specifically asked me, how do they get involved and start doing panels and being guests at conventions? And I was like, well, let's do this panel. I'll, and I can invite you to come do it, and let's see what happens as far as how you feel about doing it and whether or not it's something that, you want to grow and continue. But it just helps when you get your first one, that helps you get your next one. And
Got it.
so you do it and you use those as opportunities to show people, look at what I got and look at
Yeah.
look at the value I bring.
Exactly. So you have basically something to reference and to show them that, hey, I've done this before and I can do it again.
Right. And if you have the ability, especially if it's something like you're running it or whatever, record it, and get a good footage, not like crap footage. But I mean, any footage will do, but try to get better footage if you have the skills. Because sometimes people will say, well, do you have an example of something that you've done? And then you have a reel that you can give to them and say,
Yeah.
this is what I've done. So you got to be thinking bigger. Like when you want to do bigger stuff, you have to think bigger about what it is that you want. Like I tell cosplayers all the time, selfies and phone pics are great, but at some point you need to work with some pros and get
Yeah.
some really nice images, like really high quality images.
Yeah. I
Because
yeah, I just wrote a article about that on my website about the necessity for a good photographer. And not only because obviously I'm a photographer, but I see some amazing cosplays on a lot of these group chats on Facebook, whatever have you. And I'm like, that's an amazing cosplay, but like the image is so terrible, like
yes,
blown out of proportion, or it's too dark, or
yes,
it's like some random dude in the background doing God knows what. And I'm like, ah. So
yes, no, and it is important. And I'm in Atlanta, so I'm kind of lucky. Cosplay like really blew up big here,
it
and
did. It definitely did.
there's a lot of photographers who started out, and I mean, I've seen them. There's one photographer, Pat Sun, where
Yeah, Patrick's son. I know him.
the first pictures I saw that he did, I was like, I hate these. I hate all of them. Now he has done some of the best shots of my cosplay that I have.
Yeah.
Like he has done some awesome
Patrick
stuff.
is really good. He's a good friend. I would say a great friend because we only just recently met, but I like to call him my good friend. So yeah.
But yeah, watching them grow and seeing the changes that happen. So that's awesome. But that doesn't happen necessarily. I mean, he's been coming to cons almost, if not longer than I have, which means he's been practicing this for like 10 plus years.
Yep.
And that's the part that I think people don't realize, that so many people who are out here and the ones that and you see all the time, they've been doing this for a very long time. Mm-hmm. It didn't just happen in 2 years. True. It happened over 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't an instant success. And I don't even know if they would consider themselves successes because they give all their photos away. He gives his away. If you want to use it, he'll give it to you.
Yes,
you just
he
have
does.
to ask.
Yep.
So, and there are other people who are not as skilled who will make you pay to use their photo.
You're 100% right. That's a no. Oh, yeah, I've definitely seen some work, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. Not to say I'm the best photographer out there by any means standard, but I definitely think I do better work than some people I've seen, and I'm like,
but they're charging.
Yeah,
they take a picture
and
put a filter.
Yes,
and
yes.
That's it. That's it. And they charge you out the ass for that. And I'm like, you can keep that. Thank you. I might drop it on my Instagram. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't. I just you keep it. I'm gonna take a screenshot and show them. I was like, look at this picture this person took. I don't work with them though.
Yeah, I don't work with. Yes, exactly. And I love how you gave that, basically keeping your ear to the ground and just basically you get out there by getting out there. The more you go to cons, the more you open your mouth. As I say, closed mouths don't get fed. So you have to speak up and just get out there and dive into doing things. And that's how you get into these conventions and get, featured as guests like you. Or, I mean, you can also get lucky, or not even lucky. People can acknowledge your skill, and then you get invited to MomoCon. DragonCon.
It wasn't my cosplay skill. Honest to God, it was not. Like I was asked to judge. I worked for that. So when they make you so MomoCon, you come in as a guest. They ask you, but you're a guest judge for their cosplay contest. Mm-hmm. And I was a guest judge for their closet cosplay contest. And they were like, "Would you be interested in doing the other one, which is the more skilled one?" And I was like, "I don't make skilled cosplays, so no." Mm-hmm. Like, and a part of me is like kicking myself, like, "Girl, you should have just taken that one, because then you get to be a guest again." And
yeah.
like, yeah, but I don't that would be disingenuous. Like, it would be kind of a lie. I don't do craftsmanship. That's not that important to me. I actually like janky cosplay. I like it when you done cobbled something together from some garbage. I like it when your stuff was like, I ain't know what I was doing, so I just shredded this thing and it actually looked good, so I did it. Like, that's my favorite. But the people who are sitting up there like, no, I'm going to learn this skill and make this perfect, that does not appeal to me. I
That's
mean, it
not for
looks great.
you.
It looks great, but it's a kind of, it's a little too regimented for me, and I don't really like following directions.
Uh-huh.
So, and a lot of that is really just how well can you follow these instructions,
Yeah.
and how well can you execute these instructions. And if you practice a lot, you'll get better at it. And I'm not saying that that's not a skill, that, because it is, obviously it's a skill. It's just not a skill that appeals to me.
I got you. Nothing wrong with that. All right. So, okay, that's definitely a lot of information to take in all at once. But I like it.
And I'm going to also say this, because it is keeping your ear to the ground. Do research on conventions, honestly. And if you hear somebody talking about conventions in their area that may not be hitting social media in a way that you would see it, ask them about them. Ask them the names of them, because there's stuff that's honestly happening all the time locally, and just find out, or maybe like 2 towns over, or maybe a state away, driving distance away. Find out what those events are, and if they align with what it is that you want to do, and think about how you want to interact with them, because it honestly, that's one of the ways that you get out there, and the community is constantly growing, but it's smaller than you think. So it's just good to I mean, like, there's legwork. There's just legwork involved, and you have to decide what it is that you're going to do. Because for me, like right now, this year was my busiest year ever.
Very good. Very congratulations.
No, it was awful.
Oh, okay.
It's been terrible. Right now, I'm trying to get out of the habit of working all the time. And it's actually a struggle. I'm really having a hard time with it, but I need time to actually process things that I've done, to enjoy some of the stuff that I've done, to even unpack some of the work that I've done, because I've gone through a lot of changes this year too. But and if you're constantly going from event to event to event to event, you don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say I have not had time to do that, because this year I've been working on a podcast. I created my own event. I'm working on a documentary. We did a mini project for February. I've been to at least 8 or 9 conventions, 3 of which I was guesting at, most of which I presented something at. I've also was still writing, and I have a full-time job. Where was the me time in there?
True. I don't know what to tell you. That's yeah. I mean, I say congratulations on getting so much accomplished, but if your goal is to have a little bit more me time, yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, that grind. Yep. In fact, the last convention I went to was Creatives Con, which was in Augusta, Georgia. And somebody was like, hey, I want to take your picture, pose. And I could barely get it together to pose. I was on a panel. They said, introduce yourself. And I was like, yeah, nah, I'm good.
Nah, I'm all right, but thank you for asking.
They don't need to know who I am. Like, that's how exhausted I was. I was like, why am I doing this to myself? This is not cool. So you got to figure out, like, how you want to manage it, because it can very easily get away from you. And then you're not good for anybody, including yourself.
Gotcha. Okay. And actually, another thing that you had mentioned earlier that I wanted to touch back on, you were talking about basically, like, I've read some stuff on your website about like body positivity and things like that. I guess, could you tell us something about your experiences with that and how to, I guess, stay positive in the cruel world of cosplay?
Oh, the basic way you stay positive is don't care what anybody else has to say about you.
Simple enough.
I mean, no, it's some easier said than done. We all want other people's approval, and I don't think I'm attractive. And that always blows people's minds because so much of even the bit of popularity I have is because people think I'm attractive. So a lot of it is because of what I have to say. And I very intentionally keep those two things connected because I get it that there are people who are like, I'm gonna follow you because I like big titties. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, these big titties got a brain and a mouth, and I'm gonna tell you about yourself. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let me get some education with these titties. What's up? So, like, I get that happens. I try to mitigate that as much as I can, but my attractiveness, it matters, but it's not the most important thing about me, and it's not even the most important thing about. It's definitely not the most important thing about me to myself. It only matters in how people react to me and interact with me. But for me, like, I like doing things. I love thinking about things. I love creating things. I love sharing information. I love doing education. I love learning. I love that exchange. I love collaborating with people on different types of projects. That to me is the most important part. But I also know that people are more inclined to work with me if they like how I look. And that's a very difficult line to kind of walk because I am a fat woman and fat is not popular. It's popular in its own way, but it's not socially popular. It's not acceptable. Like, it's actually seen as something that is a negative attribute. It's something to change. It's something that you should be willing to actually, like, amputate your stomach and risk death to change. It's seen as a sign of weakness. It's seen as laziness. There's a lot of very negative stereotypes associated with being fat. And as a result, there are people who don't want to be near me, who don't want to work with me, who don't want to associate with me because of that. But it's the same thing because I'm Black. There are people who have a whole bunch of negative stereotypes attached to that, and they will actively avoid me because of that. That is just an unfortunate reality that I live with and I have to navigate. When I'm home, I don't really think about if my body is attractive or not to other people. And it's really about whether or not it's attractive to other people. I look in the mirror all the time. I got a huge mirror in my bathroom that I go and I look at myself and I'm like, hey, what's up, whatever, carry on. But it's such a hard thing to even talk about because almost the whole concept of it is about centering myself and how I feel about myself without all the other things that other people want to project onto it. And so it is about creating that strong core of yourself to say, it really doesn't matter what you think of me. Like it, and I recognize for social capital, it does. But on a personal level, it doesn't. And it really shouldn't matter with social capital. But again, the world we live in, it's an unfortunate reality. So, but the stronger you walk in yourself, the more you're like, I'm just going to be me and do me. And you can think whatever you want. It's none of my business. But if we're going to work together, this is how you're going to treat me, and hold that line with them, then even though it's hard, that people will respect that, or they just won't work with you. And I've had both of those happen.
Got it.
You can't control it, unfortunately. But I will sit back and say, if we are going to work together, you got to come correct. You got to bring at least this amount of respect to it. And there are things we're not going to talk about. There are things, if you want to point, I'm going to say, we're going to shut that conversation down. We're not going to talk about it. I'm not interested in what you think about this. I don't care if you think she shouldn't have that on. I don't care if you think I shouldn't have that on. I chose what I wanted to wear and what I wanted to do, just like they did. And it's none of our business what you think of it, and we don't care. And that's how I just go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Very nice. So basically, just knowing who you are, what you are, and not caring what anybody else thinks about it.
I mean, I say this all the time, and I've had people trying, like, well, that's kind of rough. And I'm like, no, I don't care what you think of me. If you like it, that's nice. thank you. If you don't, it's not going to stop me. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
I like if you like it, you ain't got to tell me. If you don't like it, you ain't got to tell me. In fact, I prefer if you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's really none of my business. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to decide what I want to do based on what I need and what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think the more people embrace that about themselves, the better a time they'll have when they're dealing with other people.
Got it. Okay. I like that. Very nice. Man, I'm trying to think. That was basically like almost the whole podcast right there. But that, I mean, because it's so funny because you always have like a script that you plan to follow and questions you plan to ask, but then sometimes you going down an alternative path is really good because it talks about a lot of things that I think are not fluff, essentially, talking about things that actually matter and not, oh, why do you like this? What are you doing? Stuff like that, just really in-depth, legitimate information.
I don't want to say it like that, but I get it. Like,
Yeah.
no, because for, let's see, 2017, that was when my popularity online started growing, and I was getting requests for like cosplay interviews from a lot of different online publications. Like I got something from Bleeding Cool, Pop Culture Uncovered, Brit and Company, In Style Magazine. Like they were asked a lot of times the same questions. Who's your favorite character to cosplay? Who is your favorite cosplayer? How did you get started? And it would be like the same questions over and over again. And I was like, I'm not doing any more interviews.
Yes.
Like I straight up was like, I'm not doing any more of these because these are trite and I don't like it. And then I said, okay, I'm going to take a different approach to answering these questions. I'm going to bring my entire self to answering these questions. I'm not going to just and you'll see, like if you ever look at my interview questions versus somebody else in the same magazine, like there would be 1 or 2 word answers for theirs, and mine is like 2 paragraphs, because I said I'm going to bring the entirety of who I am to answering these trite ass questions, so that when you read it, you're like, oh crap, like that was a lot, because we don't talk about the internal, like it's not even battles, but the internal process of how we make the decisions for the things that we do. Like when we choose who we cosplay, like everyone thinks that it's something goofy, like something really simple. Like I just thought she was fun, and that's because people don't want to actually do the work of saying what's fun about them. What was it that was fun in that character, or that you liked about it that made you say, I want to do this? I'll do that work, and I have no problem sharing it. I talk a lot, I write a lot, I can articulate why I did it. And so I decided that I was going to bring that to any interview that I do, because I thought that was just a more accurate representation. And I also like to reveal the complexity behind the decisions that we make. People like to oversimplify shit because it's easy,
Yeah.
but the stuff that we do is not easy. Even the decision as to whether or not to buy or make a cosplay, that's not an easy decision for a
It's
lot of
really
people.
not.
And so like there's a whole process. Like if you buy it, how do you buy it? Are you buying it from Party City? Are you buying it from Spirit, one of them pop-up Halloween stores? Are you buying it, are you going to get it commissioned? Like how are you going to do it? Are you like, there's a whole process and the whole reason why you make those decisions. And so I don't I don't have a problem bringing that to the forefront, because I think it helps people. I think it helps them when they make their decisions.
Okay. I definitely think it does. Hearing other people's excuse me, experiences and hearing what they've done a lot of times can help you also make your decisions. It's like basically knowledge without having to gain the knowledge yourself.
Well, yeah. I mean, we could say that. I mean, they gain the knowledge by listening. There's still
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, they gain it without having to. If someone hits their hand with a hammer, I don't have to do it too to know that it hurts. I can just ask you, hey, what was that like?
So, and yeah, there is an active part in choosing who you're going to listen to and who you're not, because I talk about this all the time. I could learn how to make a gauntlet and make a perfect gauntlet, because there's a million and one maybe not a million. There's hundreds of YouTube videos showing you how to make a perfect gauntlet.
Yeah.
And if I
Yeah.
follow those instructions, I could do it well. And I never do. I won't even, I never will watch them. I will sit back and say, I'm going to just sit here in my head and try and figure out what I want to make it out of, how I want to try and make it, and what I want to try and do. And then just play with it until I get something that's close enough for me to be happy. And that's just my preferred method of doing things. I like to try and figure it out myself, and then the creative process is working with these different materials and seeing what I can and can't do, and failing is another big part of it. It's frustrating and it makes me angry, and I'm like, why didn't I just go watch a video and learn how to do this? But it's also fun, and it makes I like the way it changes my thought patterns so that I can do it. So yeah, but other people, they don't want to do that. Or I mean, and this is a real touchy area when it comes to cosplay. We as people, as consumers of cosplay, as people
Yeah.
who like to see other cosplayers, I've touched it before, we like it when people look like the characters. We really do.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that makes it very, very challenging is that we will love somebody, we will say they are a great cosplayer because they look like the character. And they're looking like the character is nothing but circumstances of birth. It was just luck of the
True.
draw, and then recognizing that they look like the character,
True.
and then going and trying to look more like the character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a fascinating thing, because at that point it's like, is this just a fashion show? Is it just modeling? But it's a lot of different things. It's all of that, as well as the creative part, as well as the building part, as well as the conceptualizing part. There's the modeling part and learning how to do poses. I really can't stress enough. I wish that people would learn how to make faces and to change their expressions and emote in their pictures. I would love that a lot. And I say this because I had a friend where we did a photo shoot together, and I went through 20 pictures, and all 20 pictures, her face was the exact same. And her body would move and her face would be the same. And I said, we need to have a talk, because I need you to fix this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm never taking pictures with you again.
It really needs to change.
But that's just a part of the learning, growing, whatever. How do you make it fun for you? But if photos aren't important to you, right?
Yeah.
Then why would you bother doing that work?
Yeah.
So you really do have to figure out what it is you want to gain out of it, what it is that you want out of it, what's important to you in this. I had another friend who she just liked making stuff, but she would make it for herself because she didn't feel like she could sell it.
Yeah.
I was like, you could just make it for me. I'll wear it. She never did that, but but she started making it for other people and stopped wearing it because she didn't like wearing it. And I was like, well, that's good that you know that, because you kept forcing yourself to wear it and you hated the whole process. Don't just make what you want to make.
Yeah.
So it is, you do have to be introspective and listen to yourself somewhat. And if doing this is making you really unhappy, which happens for a lot of people, that means you got to stop and assess what it is that you're doing and figure out what it is that you're not getting and what it is that you're aiming for, so that you can adjust your aim accordingly.
Oh, okay. And so actually, we're pretty much almost out of time, but there was one more thing that you had mentioned earlier too that I wanted you to elaborate a bit on, or just discuss a bit more. I know, like, of course, race is obviously a big issue in America and whatever. But I was curious, what has been your experience with, like, interracial, marriage or dating in, like, the cosplay scene? Because I notice, on a lot of the different chat groups, like, people sometimes get slammed for dating, specifically white person dating a black person or vice versa, or dating Asian, whatever have you. And I was just wondering, just what has been your experience with it in terms of how it's affected your cosplay and things like that?
So I did not see myself with the white guy at all. I didn't see that coming at all. That said, there is a lot of anti-blackness, and this is a global thing, worldwide, because white supremacist patriarchal capitalism, actually gains its power through oppressing others, and specifically oppressing and exploiting Blackness. And we see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to geek culture is built very much around these fantasy items or these fandoms, that have popped up over the years. All of their roots, for the most part, at least in the Western culture, are white based, Eurocentric properties. And so there's a lot of racism encoded into the things that we're consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And we a lot of people aren't as critical of that as they need to be. And part of it is also that, you know, a lot of the Black people who are into geek stuff, a lot of them either grew up around, almost completely surrounded by whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were friends with white people, and those were their only friends. And even if there were a few Black people around, they were like, but you went to that weird, Dungeons and Dragons goofiness. And it's a whole other, like, they would feel rejected and so forth. So they would embrace the people who shared their interests, even when it came with a good whopping dose of racism.
Yeah.
They would let it slide. And to be honest, a lot of us have had to learn to ignore or make ourselves numb to the constant racist stuff that we're experiencing just as Black people in the world. And that's anytime you interact with whiteness. I grew up with a Black family in a Black neighborhood. My school was 30% Black, but that meant there were 60% white people, and they were doing racist shit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That was a part of my life. I had white teachers who would do racist shit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They would assume that I was cheating on my test, so I didn't know what I was doing, or try to embarrass me in front of the class just because they could. It made them feel powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be no way I could have gotten through school if I didn't learn to ignore that.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where you're ignoring that becomes an internalized anti-Blackness, an internalized self-hatred, because you start mimicking what you're seeing and mimicking what you're experiencing and what they're saying. And I don't think enough people acknowledge that and then do the work to understand that some of the communities that they build around them are very much rooted in how not Black they act, how much they are courting whiteness, how they are trying to become socially acceptable to their friends who happen to be all white because that's where they grew up and that's the only way. But that acceptance is completely rooted in them rejecting anything that's considered to be Black, including themselves. And so they have to do a lot of kind of thinking and soul searching to kind of figure out what that stuff is. And it's hard. So when you navigate these spaces, right,
Mm-hmm.
you encounter that a lot. Even as some of the people who consider themselves pro-Black, you'll hear things like, well, I thought, I was rejected by the other Black kids because I thought that reading was important and that speaking properly was really important, and I cared about my education. Well, that's anti-Black as hell. Like, and people don't recognize it and they don't acknowledge it. So, and I tell you, you will hear that a lot in like Black geek spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So we are all tainted. We have all been corrupted by this, and we are constantly being programmed it through the visuals that we see, through the way art is drawn, through the way that they make, the good guys lighter and the bad guys darker. And that happens a lot in the art. Like, or even in projects, so colorism is also a part of it. And these are things that people have to kind of confront within themselves in order to recognize when they're being harmful. Then there's other intersections. There's, the LGBTQIA community. There is patriarchy. Black men will opt into patriarchy to the supremacy of masculinity in a heartbeat. And I constantly encounter Black men in these spaces who sit back and say, we should just act like race isn't an issue. We shouldn't, like, why do we have to make it about race in these spaces like they not Black?
Mm-hmm.
And they really think that, if they just never talk about it, then they're accepted. And I'm like, nah, you still Black and everything you do is still political. And So, but they're opting into a way that they can get power in these spaces. And so it is very complicated. And there's a lot of different types of oppression that are operating in different ways to oppress different types of groups, because that's the only way that we see ourselves with value, is if we have power. And if that power is at the expense of anybody else, and it's not really power, it's just oppression, and you're just trying to be the newer oppressor. So it's something that is a constant work in progress for people.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't like hearing about it, and they hate when you challenge them on it. I won't say burned a lot of bridges, but I have created a lot of negative interactions, because when I see it happening, I'm like, okay, let's address it. And then they get defensive and angry that I'm even bringing it up. And I'm like, I didn't actually bring it up. I'm actually responding to you doing it.
Yeah.
Let's work on it. So it's hard. It's hard to be in those spaces. And that's why I write about it a lot. And even on my blog, there's no comments on my blog, like very intentionally, because this is a space for me to get my thoughts and observations and analysis out there in the way that you can engage in it when you choose, and then go think about it. And you don't have to react, you don't have to respond, and you don't have to attack me because I said something that bothers you.
Mm-hmm.
You can just listen to it, not listen to it, absorb it, whatever, and then go about your business.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that that's a bit safer for me. And and I'm hoping that it's helpful for other people, because so many people aren't ready to have these conversations, even though they're conversations that need to be had. And I decided to start doing presentations specifically about some of these topics at different events that I'm at, to create spaces where we can talk about it in a way where we can learn from each other, as opposed to just trying to shut each other up and, play Oppression Olympics and all that goofiness.
Oppression Olympics. I never heard that before.
Really?
Never
It's
heard
common.
that term. Yeah.
It's common, but yeah, people do that a lot. Well, I'm really oppressed because I'm a gay man, and I'm like, yeah, okay, you are oppressed for being a gay man, but your oppression is different from, this black woman's oppression, from this gay black woman's oppression, from this trans black woman's oppression. They're all different, and we have to acknowledge it. So,
all right. Well, then.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for, because I'll tell you.
I see that. So, yeah. Now I'm going to have to spend extra time on the editing, but no problem.
I'm going to say it's okay to have a long episode every once in a while, but carry on.
It is. It's just I have to tell my my host that, like, hey, I just need some extra space this month at no charge. No, we're not even close to that. I'm joking. Okay. Yeah. But that was, I guess, basically everything for this episode. Was there anything else you wanted to include that maybe I didn't ask?
I want people to follow me, TaLynnKel.com.
Where else can they reach you?
So I'm on the social media, so Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, the old people's social media. I don't do any of that newer stuff. You can reach me there as TaLynn Kel. And also, check out different events that are happening, especially in Atlanta. We have a ton of events down here that some of them are very low cost or free. If you follow and subscribe to my blog, then I will, and it's not really a blog, I'm going to call it an essay site, to my site. I'll let you know some things that are coming up in the future, so that if you want to check it out, that's cool. The event that I hosted this year was a free event in Atlanta. I'm hoping to do it again next year, because I very specifically am focused on, Black women in geek spaces. And keep an eye out for when we drop our documentary, which I think is going to be next year, because I am tired and I need some time to get my stuff together. But yeah, to keep most up to date, my Facebook calendar is probably going to be the best one, and that is, TaLynn Kel on Facebook, and check everything out.
Very cool. Definitely. Hopefully, everyone who's listening will definitely check that out. I know I will. I've gone on your site a few times, and I'll admit I'm more of the Instagrammer, though. I definitely just like to flip through Instagram. I like the instant gratification.
Okay.
Yep. So
That's why I started adding essays to Instagram.
yes, yes. I am more inclined to read a bit more like, oh, okay, what's this picture got? So yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks so much again for coming on to the episode and sharing your knowledge with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
No problem. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, stay boundless.